Battery recycling. As EV adoption accelerates and waste management becomes a pressing environmental necessity, battery recycling is emerging as a critical enabler of supply chain security and circular economy resilience. Battery recycling and secondary life applications lie at the intersection of critical mineral security, resource efficiency, and circular innovation, thus closing the loop on India's clean energy transition. But the question still remains, is this the next wave of climate investment, or is there a space to find scalable models in this space? To take us through this thematic deep dive, I would now like to call Sagnik Chakrabarti from CPI. Over to you, Sagnik.
Okay, and can you just help me with this? The clicker is this one? This one. Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a chance to recharge over lunch. Let's start the afternoon with a focus on lithium-ion battery recycling. Okay, great. Green one, right? This sector is now a critical part of India's industrial future. By 2030, India could be generating 43,000 tons of lithium-ion battery waste every year. This is driven by the rapid growth in electric vehicles and stationary storage applications. Today, less than 1% of these batteries are formally recycled. It is not just a waste challenge, it's an imperative to recover critical minerals, reduce import dependence, and build resilient supply chains. Supportive policy is creating a conducive environment for the growth. Key regulations like the Battery Waste Management Rules, Critical Minerals Mission, and the upcoming Battery Passport are all establishing clear mandates for attracting investment. Lithium-ion battery recycling solves for resource security and circular economy mandates simultaneously. There are three main approaches globally. Pyrometallurgy, which uses high heat to extract metals from the black mass, hydrometallurgy, which relies on chemical solutions, and direct recycling, which focuses on regenerating the active cathode material and reusing them in batteries. Critically, the pyro and hydro methods are commercially viable and can be deployed with high technology readiness levels. Direct recycling remains an experimental state and is not yet scalable. The sector shows viability across 4 dimensions. These include a strong climate and resource efficiency impact, long-term economic potential, availability of mature technologies, and growing policy alignment, including duty exemptions for raw material imports and incentives for OEM partnerships. Opportunities exist for investors across the value chain to deploy capital for scale. Upstream activities focus on collection and logistics for digital traceability, disassembly, and pre-processing for safety automation. Downstream activities center on metallurgical processing and refining to extract battery-grade salts and finally reintegrate the metals into the supply chain. Key challenges remain. The informal sector dominates, feedstock supply and quality is unpredictable, and high capex creates long gestation periods. However, strong enablers are pushing things forward, including the enforcement of regulations, state-level EV recycling policies, and technology breakthroughs like the lithium-first extraction method by CSMCRI, which is a CSIR lab. Due to the complexity, vertically integrated players, those who work across the value chain, are recognized for their full potential. To unlock the sector's full potential, large-scale capital deployment is required across the value chain. Investor due diligence should focus on 3 core considerations. The first is feedstock security. Investors must confirm the long-term reliable supply to reduce the dependence on the unpredictable informal collection sector. Second is technology maturity. proven high-yield methods like hydrometallurgy that can cost-effectively extract metals like lithium, cobalt, and nickel should be prioritized. The third is regulatory compliance. Adherence to rules like the battery waste management rules, safety protocols, and clear environmental performance metrics are very important. The required funding mix should combine de-risking blended finance for early-stage infrastructure and R&D with growth capital aimed at scaling the integrated players. Thus, the sector is a timely and important investment area aligned with India's industrial and climate goals. The Green Investment Opportunities Report will be made available shortly on the IIC and CPI website. I encourage you to explore that for deeper insights. With that, I'll hand it over to the IIC team to take the conversation forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sagnik. To explore how investors, entrepreneurs, and policymakers are shaping the economics risk framework and global positioning of India's recycling industry, we have an excellent panel today. I now call upon Vasudha Madhavan, founder, Ostara Advisors, Vipul Patel, partner seed investing, IMA Ventures, Ashish Gupta, head of international business, Atero, Jay Shah, principal, SBI Ventures Limited, and to moderate this session, Janvi Papriwal, associate partner, South Asia, Circulate Capital. Over to you, Janvi.
Thank you, Divya. And welcome back, everyone, from lunch. A big warning to my co-panelists that we have a tough job ahead to keep everyone awake after that scrumptious dal makhni and gulab jamun. So without much ado, let's get started. Maybe we can start with a quick round of introduction before we do a deep dive. And many thanks to Sagnik for setting the background for this session. Maybe I can quickly start with an intro. So Janvi Papriwal here. I lead Circulate Capital's investments in India. Circulate Capital is a global investment platform investing in circular economy, having $250+ million of AUM. We have two broad pillars of investments. One is the private equity strategy, wherein we invest $10 to $20 million per company in the emerging markets of Latin America, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. We also have a small innovation carve-out from which we invest in emerging technologies across the world, trying to replace materials like plastic through innovation. With regards to battery recycling, we have made one investment in India called Ace Green, which has a sustainable way of recycling batteries. So I'll hand it over to each one of you to give a very quick introduction before we deep dive into the topic. We'll start from you, Ashish.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, Ashish Gupta this side from Atero Recycling. I am heading international business for the company. We are the pioneers of electronic waste recycling in India and also the largest player in the market today. Heavily regulated, working closely with the government on the EPR mandate and recycling electronic waste, lithium-ion battery waste from across India as well as with global partnerships. So happy to be here. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Vasudha Madhavan, investment banker by profession, 22 years in the business now. I run Ostara Advisors. We are India's first climate tech focused investment bank. We started doing deals in the EV and the decarbonization space way back in 2015. We've closed several deals in the growth stage. We do typically Series A to C and M&As as well. And most of our deals are in the $5 to $50 million US dollar range. And we are very deeply committed to working with bright and upcoming startups as well as scale-ups which are focused on decarbonization across mobility, energy, circular economy, sustainable alternatives to consumer items, etc. So we cover a very wide range of sectors and subsectors. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jay here, representing SBI Ventures and part of NEEV Funds as a principal. NEEV Fund is a platform which focuses on climate investments across India, and it's a 1,500 crore fund size across Fund 1 and Fund 2. We typically fund sectors and companies which are focused on climate and environment, which includes battery recycling, which includes waste management, pollution control equipment manufacturing company. It also includes green hydrogen, renewable water, sustainable agriculture, so on and so forth. So anything which positively impacts the climate and environment, we are okay and happy to look at those companies. In terms of the investment, we typically look at between $5 million to $20 million of investment. And we typically take minority positions, which is between 25% to 35-40%, depending on the size and the scale of the company. Look forward to today's interaction with my co-panelists. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vipul. I lead investment at IMA Ventures. We are entrepreneurship center of IIM Ahmedabad. We partner with founders in the 0 to 1 journey and provide capital connect and coaching. So far in our journey, we have invested in more than 400 plus startups at a seed stage, and there are 40 plus companies we have done at an early growth stage. As an organization, we are a technology agnostic, sector agnostic, but more focusing on 3 thematic areas: deep tech, digital inclusion, and sustainability. In fact, we are the first one who started climate focused fund in India in 2012 called Infuse Venture. And sustainability is one of our definitely focus area. Within sustainability, we have done investment in green materials, battery, like decarbonization and many more. Within the battery also, we have actually invested in the multiple battery technologies as well as in terms of the application in the like mobility as an application. Thank you.
So Vipul, we'll start with you since you talked about the 0 to 1 journey where you fund startups. We did hear about lithium-ion battery technologies, but can you take a step back and talk a little more about the different battery technologies and different battery recycling technologies that you're seeing in the market? Which ones you think are more emerging in nature, which ones you think have a risk of technology obsolescence, and if someone is looking to start up or someone is looking to invest in the space, what is more attractive?
Yeah, so even if you look at like a global perspective or even Indian perspective, definitely lithium-ion battery is dominating the market, right? And very specifically application if you talk about more like electric vehicles or energy storage perspective. If you look at the key trend perspective, there are basically a different chemistry variant where like very specifically if you talk about like NMC, like LFPs, these are the basically you can say technologies where majority companies are right now operating. And application is basically, or use cases is very specific application, specifically, let's example, based on the energy density, cost, or safety point of view, they're deciding. There is another, let's example, solid state batteries are also now actually becoming like at least it's a emerging technology altogether because of the promise what they are showing in the energy storage, the improved the safety function of it, but still it's basically at an advanced stage of the basically development side. Sodium ion is something like in terms of you can say picking again very well, but mostly for a stationary applications. At the same time, there are also some of the lithium-based, like a new advanced batteries technology people are talking about, where lithium sulfate, lithium air batteries. These are the again they are at a basically very very high level R&D stage. So these are the different technology globally and India like people are attempting. If you look at especially when you compare like let's example developed country and India market, mostly developed countries are looking for or they are using the technologies where very specific application for long run and basically high energy density. When we talk about in India, mostly it's affordability, longevity, and the same like fast charging. So these are the way people are adopting the different chemistry and the technology. At the same time, there is a very different innovation. There are multiple startups who are operating in India. So let's say example, for cell manufacturing, right? So for a cell manufacturing, right now very heavy dependency on the China per se. But there are few companies, so like there is one company we also support called Fairman coming out of IIT Kanpur. They are also innovating on the cell manufacturing side. There is a company called Eternal, which is basically coming up with a newer kind of the cell design, which is basically reducing the overall cost of the battery at the same time in terms of reducing the basically the heat, basically the thermal efficiency they are actually increasing over there. There are some of the companies also innovating on the advanced material. So by using that particular material, they are actually developing a very specific kind of the application. So when I say NM, like the basic technology for like electric vehicles or might be energy storage is there, but there are newer applications. Let's example, eVault. They require a different kind of the technologies where they require like a faster basically power generation immediately around that. So there also there is a lot of innovations are happening.
Sure.
Yeah.
And when we do a deeper dive into battery recycling, right, which material types are more in demand? What kind of recycling technologies are more viable for the Indian context?
So prominently right now, if you look at India, definitely pyrometeorological or might be in more like a hydrometeorology is technology is a prominent in India, right? And people are attempting, right? But at the same time, there are few technology where people are at the R&D stage, right? So people are now also talking about biotechnological ways, like they are saying like biohydrometeorology, which is again very high, like it's at a R&D stage or might be at a science level. But there are also attempt basically happening. But majorly what we have seen, I think we also have invested in a company called PKMP, and like there are many recyclers right now operating in India. They are more focusing on like initially you can say hydro or my hydrometeorology technology so far.
Thank you so much for that. And now I'll move to Ashish. Ashish, you are an operator, and you have much deeper insights about business models in the battery recycling space. Can you share some light on what is the technology that Atiro focuses on? What's your business model like? And how have you been able to scale your collection, processing, and offtake?
Sure. Yeah, and greatly pointed out by Vipul, the technology is constantly cultivating. And at Atero as well, we have focused on cultivating all kinds of lithium battery recycling technology. So today we sort of service all kind of chemistries such as LCO, LTO, LMO, and MC. And our primary focus while we cultivated this technology was twofold. One was how do we maximize the recovery from these spent batteries, and the second aspect is how do we minimize the environmental impact. And for that, what we have done is we built a proprietary technology which employs certain steps. For instance, we employ mechanical separation followed by a hydrometallurgical process, then followed by refining of the final material output to get the battery grade materials out of these batteries. So today, with our technology, we've been able to sort of service lithium, cobalt, manganese, nickel, everything at 99.5% purity, which is the battery grade material that we extract out of these batteries. So from a technology standpoint, that is the expertise we've cultivated over the years. We've worked very deeply with OEM partners as well. As they've cultivated new technology, we have also sort of ensured that in parallel recycling processes are enabled to have a more circular outcome in these mediums. From a business standpoint, there are three aspects that again we have looked at. One is of course the sourcing aspect, which is very critical for the process to run smoothly. And on that front, we have tie-ups with all the OEM partners. We have sort of vertically integrated across the value chain, targeting aggregators today who are essentially procuring all these batteries, and also have long-term agreements with a lot of these manufacturers and automotive companies today, right? So that builds a very healthy supply line for us. Of course, the process ensures that there is a high recovery output, which ultimately leads to the third aspect, which ensures that there is an offtake medium that we have cultivated again with the manufacturers both domestically and globally, to ensure that there is sustainability in this entire process. And that's how we've cultivated over the years. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And given that you lead international business for Atiro, can you share how you are connected and impacted by the global supply chains, given that the macros have been so strange and unpredictable over the last 12, 18 months?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So firstly, understanding how Attero is positioned in terms of the global dynamics, we have been more of a strategic partner. We've ensured that there is a domestic node in India which has the processing capability to ensure that the critical mineral output can be provided to domestic markets. So from a long-term perspective, what we're working towards is to minimize the impact of imports of all these critical minerals in India. Of course, from a global standpoint, we have cultivated partnerships which ensure that there's a feedstock availability to us. But that said, yes, global macros such as geopolitical scenarios do impact supply chain for us. So if you look at the EV industry largely, it is evolving across geographies with different geographies on different so to say trajectories. And that's where we've seen a lot of price volatility. We've seen a lot of demand supply issues as well. And of course, everyone here has seen how China has been responding, and there are a lot of sanctions that have been come into play, which do impact our supply chain. But we ensure that at least some partnerships, the key OEM partnerships, supply us with the regular feedstock there, right? In addition, what we have also sort of seen is that the financial landscape has also transitioned quite a bit. There is climate financing at play. ESG investments are coming into the picture, where people are really focusing on bridging the gap between time to market, because it comes with a high R&D cost, and ensuring that at least we are able to provide scalable solutions. So there is an impact, but there are outcomes that we are also sort of trying to work around.
Thanks for that. And moving to you, Vasudha. Vasudha, given that you've been an investment banker, you're working closely with several startups and companies in the climate EV ecosystem, and also constantly taking feedback from investors. So what, according to you, are the key enablers and drivers that are required to scale companies and attract investments in the lithium-ion battery recycling space? And what factors do you think investors should bear in mind while making these investment decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Janvi. I think we all understand very well now that lithium-ion battery recycling is something which is not a nice to have, it's a must have. It's something we need to do to secure ourselves as we go on this electrification journey in mobility, and also as we go more into renewables where we are going to need energy storage. So batteries are going to be proliferating a lot more as we go forward. What has happened so far, in this, and of course the policy environment has been fairly indicative of directionally where the country needs to go, because with the extended producer responsibility, we do know that we need to be, the OEMs now need to be responsible for bringing back the used batteries and so on. So I think structurally and directionally we are, we have made the right moves, but structurally I think there are a lot of pieces yet to be put in place, which are crucial for large-scale investments to come into this space. What we have seen so far, I think, are essentially fairly episodic investments, which have not really, we haven't seen a very large sort of sectoral or a thematic growth with multiple companies raising capital. We have seen, a few, and essentially, I think what investors look for is different in this situation, in this case, as compared to any of the other businesses which are driven by technology. Here, it is a lot to do with capex. You have to put in, as a company, you need to put in large capex. You need to secure your feedstock in a very predictable manner, and you need to have the technology in place to be able to create something of value, which is actually generating higher margins than, and is competing at the international level. Because ultimately, if you are a LI battery recycling startup or a scale-up, what you're really doing is you're feeding into the global commodity markets. That's one approach, there, and for that, investors are very keen to look at what are those differential margins that you're able to generate from the pure, salts that you're able to refine and sell. The other part of it, is really, are you doing something completely innovative or doing something disruptive where you could attract more early stage funding, which is, for instance, if you're trying to innovate or come up with cathode to cathode sort of an approach, which is also very important for India, where you really use existing used battery and innovate on the entire process rather than the typical traditional black mass followed by purification kind of a thing. So I think there is capital available both for innovation as well as the scale up side of things. However, we need to look at very clearly where the margins are coming from and how you can actually differentiate and scale up that in a defined period of time, which are as per investor requirements.
So coming to you, Jay, you're from SBI NEEF Fund, and you're a climate-focused investor. But you guys have still shied away from investing in lithium-ion and battery recycling. So what, according to you, are the key challenges in this sector? And with regards to challenges, and Impact Fund definitely deep dives into ESG risks. So if you can share a little bit more on that as well.
Sure. So I will break it down into two parts. One is from a challenges point of view, and second is the ESG. First, to answer on the challenges point, I think we have been tracking this sector for last 4 to 5 years, especially EV and the lithium-ion battery recycling. So what we have observed is there is lack of standardization in terms of the collection of the batteries, then the dismantling of the batteries, and how do you process or recycle these batteries. So there is a lack of standardization, which actually leads to various multiple companies following multiple other processes and not really standardized process, which affects the capex requirement, which also impacts your efficiency, recovery efficiency, which leads to a lower IRR compared to the other processes which has been followed. Then other is there's lack of reverse logistics which is there in terms of collection of the batteries, and also if you look at it, the lack of aggregator platform which is there in the country. So that is one. In terms of technology, what we have seen is there are two technologies which is typically being followed. One is hydrometallurgical and second is a pyrometallurgical. And if you look at it from a both perspective, low and efficient recovery of metals is something which is impacting the sector, and there is also high energy usage. So this actually impacts your efficiency and production process. In terms of the economic part of it, I think if you are extracting lower metals or efficiency is lower versus high setup cost, is obviously over a long period of time, it will have lower returns. So that is something which is being looked at, or challenges which are there in the sector. Then if you look at from an ESG point of view, environment, if you look at the disposal, there is improper disposal of the batteries. And this could affect either the water pollution, contamination of the water, or this could lead to the soil contamination. And also the processes which have been followed by the company, recycling process, are not really energy efficient, which leads to higher emissions currently. And because of that, the pollution is higher, or the emissions are higher. On the social aspect, which is the unsafe working conditions and child labor, this is something from our perspective which is very, very important, and we are very focused and sure about that the company should not be looking at that. And the third, on the governance point of view, traceability continues to be a challenge, and there are also a weak compliances and monitoring from a government perspective and from the company perspective. So these are some of the challenges from the sector point of view and the ESG that we look at.
That sounds like a lot of challenges in this sector, but and maybe diverting back to you, Ashish, how would you react to these kind of concerns that investors have, and how have you been able to address them?
Yes, correct. So of course, there are multiple challenges, and our journey at Atero has also been sort of faced with that, because we were the first ones to start formalizing the space. And at that point of time, there was less understanding of electronic waste altogether. Of course, the electronics were very much in operation. Every household had them. But when I look back at our journey and today where we are, we have sort of solved these working very closely with the government bodies. So we worked very closely with CPCB. We comply, 100% on the EPR mandate. And we have also ensured that from safety, environmental and sustainability standards, we are completely audited by different global bodies today to ensure that that our processes are compliant, our output is also with the minimum environmental impact, right? So there are a lot of these certifications also that we have in place. But interestingly, what we have also done is, and as you were talking about that, there is no formal aggregation medium. So we've sort of worked extensively on cultivating that as well today. We've launched a digital platform which brings on board all these formal and informal aggregators to sort of be able to transact and be able to offload the electronic waste to the right recyclers, right? With that, we have also created a solution for end consumer. So today, as we speak, we are able to pick up any end-of-life electronic from household across 20 plus cities in India, which has been through our efficient and strong reverse logistics capability that we have cultivated over the years. So I think it's very important how each portion of the problem needs to be plugged in, and that's where we've been able to successfully work across the value chain. Yeah.
Sure. Indeed, this sector is tough, and there is a lot of creativity and innovation that goes into making it viable, sustainable, and investable. On that, Vipul, I can quickly ask you that what are you seeing in startups and emerging innovations as to what are these companies doing differently, or what should they do differently to attract mainstream investors or even climate investors, so that all these concerns can be addressed?
The common question, right? Let's example, when an entrepreneur reaching out for this particular market, right? The common question from an investor perspective is coming out more because there are this needs to be operated at a certain scale because it's in a manufacturing side. But when it's come to how many basically end of the life batteries available today, right? So in terms of it's a chicken and egg issue, right? You require to operate at a certain scale, but enough basically either batteries are available around that or not, right? So market perspective, these are some of the questions basically coming out. Second is basically also we see some of the challenges around there is already informal market, right? So there is an informal market where actually they are playing with or they're using battery in a very different purpose, right? And that is also creating some kind of the basically or creating some kind of impact for the people who want to formalize and operate or might be put up the scales around that. On technology perspective, if you go back and look at, I think research perspective, there are multiple things are available. There are more progressive technologies also people are talking about, but those are basically mostly at a lab scale. It's not experimented lab to in terms of commercial scale. So still there is not enough activities happening from or everything available from at the lab scale and now testing out at the commercial perspective. And that's where there are only limited set of people who are actually coming and talking about the newer technology versus they are more getting into just on the recycling side of the thing, rather than they come up with okay, these are the best way or newer way to recycle basically batteries on that.
So Vasudha, you earlier talked about EPR and how government can play a role in giving a boost to the sector. Can you share a little more about how you think this is going to shape up, or what suggestions we can put forward, and what learnings we can imbibe from EPR and say plastics recycling and other sectors into battery recycling?
Yeah, I think as a lot of the energy transition has been driven by regulation, right? So I think positive supportive regulation and which also gives a directional feedback to the market players, I think is very important. I think essentially the challenges are not at this point are not so much regulatory. I think the challenges are more to do with execution. Regulatorily, the government has said, within 5 years, it's your responsibility if you sold a bike or a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or you need to bring back the batteries, I think 90% of them within 5 years. And that's the extended producer responsibility. So that part of it now, it's very good policy to have, but are people able to do it, right? So, and the challenges there are definitely to do with reverse logistics, so the company itself has to now activate its dealer channels, etc., to bring back the batteries. The other thing which is very true for India is that India, nothing really goes waste. We have a informal sector which is there across all of these waste channels, where value is being created in a very informal, unorganized fashion. And that has happened to batteries as well. What we need is to formalize this sector, and that formalization is where, as per my understanding, investors also find it challenging to back this, because that formalization has not been adequately done. Now here, every part of it, everything from collecting the feedstock to bringing it back, bringing it back into the right places, analyzing the quality of the feedstock, checking if cells can be now in a battery pack, you can repurpose it into energy storage, or you can scrap it. Now to scrap it, you really need to make sure that the battery, there's no more juice left in it, and that analysis can ideally only be done in a proper formal environment, formal factory where these plants and machinery exist, right? Plant and machinery exist. So I think therefore the challenge is not so much about regulation, but to say that companies will take at a more larger scale these required actions. Now, in order to do reverse logistics, there needs to be adequate incentivization of the dealer channels and of the other channels which collect back used, or even companies that deal in used vehicles, to be able to adequately monetize and refurbish and monetize used batteries. Even converting them into energy storage packs is a very meaningful, it's a good revenue generating, high margin business if you can do it well at scale. Similarly, if you can analyze and then essentially do the recycling part of it, then you have the full stack of what you're doing with the used battery. And here again, purity matters, as I said earlier, and what is the scale at which you're doing it matters. I think there's news suggests that there's about 44,000 tons of battery waste that can be handled by various plants that have been set up by probably the top 3 or 4 key players in India today. We need that to be much, much higher. We need that entire plant capacity to be utilized fully. For that to be, going into the Indian or the international value chain for battery materials. And I think then we are on our way, but I think there are some, like we said, there are some key things that we can do, importantly, to be able to formalize this entire informal battery collection, reverse logistics, and battery handling value chain. And one important thing before I finish is that I think we need battery recycling to be more localized rather than centralized, because obviously vehicles are being used in so many parts of the country. Logistics becomes a very expensive and a difficult proposition. So if we can actually create battery scrapping factories, as well as at least the black mass production to be more localized to various states, probably every company should think of it at a state level, if not at a district level, and then take it from there into more centralized factories, potentially for further refining. I think that would be one good approach where the private sector could further innovate. Obviously, it needs capital to do it, but these are challenges that I think our startups are working on an ongoing basis. So I'm hopeful that we'll make a positive difference.
Thanks, Vasudha. So coming back to you, Jay, and we've heard about role of government regulations, we've heard about formalization, we've heard about reverse logistics, and you also highlighted all the risks that exist and challenges that exist in this ecosystem. So what in your view can be done to, number one, mitigate these risks? And given that you come from a private equity background, For you, scale is very important, right? Pathway to exit is important, and with limited demonstration of exits in the sector, what do you think, are ways in which companies can mitigate these risks and enable, stronger pathways to scale and exits so that investors like yourself, can come in?
So we are actually firm believer of government policies, and it actually enables a lot of growth in the sector. So we have seen that in the past, in 2015, 2016, when the solar mission was launched, it actually took the solar sector to a different trajectory. Similar thing was observed in the Satat mission. The biofuel took off. The biofuel sector took off. Green hydrogen, with the launch of green hydrogen mission, there's a lot of development happening in the green hydrogen sector as well. And on the battery recycling, government has started focusing on it because of the recent rare earth mineral challenges which are coming up. So we have seen that National Mineral Critical Mission, which was launched by the Government of India. Then we've also seen the other schemes, which includes battery waste recycling. And there is a mandate to pick up at least from the 5% by 27-28, at least 5% of the battery has to be recycled from the current battery waste. And it will grow up to 20% by 2030 and 2031. That's the mandate by the Government of India. So we believe that once the government is coming up with policies, with the support, with incentives, with the PLIs, it will unlock the growth in the sector. In terms of individual companies, what we are looking at is, if you look at it from 3-4 years ago, the chemistry was largely tilted towards NMC. And currently in 2025, where we are seeing is 50% NMC and 50% LFP. So it is very important for the companies to focus on both the chemistries, all the multiple chemistries which they can recycle, so that even if the technological changes or technical changes are there, they're able to adopt to the new technological innovations which are happening. That is one of the aspects which is being looked at. It is also important that the companies may also look at globally established players which are looking for joint ventures in India. And some of our experience also, what we have seen is our portfolio companies from the NEEV 1 and the NEEV 2, because of our global LP parentage, we have been able to connect to them with the global established players and bring those technologies in India. So that is also something which will de-risk your business model to a certain extent, and it will make it easier for the companies to scale because somebody has already worked on the technology and they're able to grow and scaled it up. So similar thing can be replicated in India as well. That is something which could be looked at. On the other part is that we could also look at off-take contracts, so which I think Ashish did mention about it. So companies should have an off-take contract as well, and the feedstock cycle or the feedstock collection should also be there. So it ensures the scalability from a long-term perspective. So these are the few thoughts from the scalability and exit perspective.
Thank you so much. We'll now open the floor for questions, if any.
Well, congratulations to all the panelists for very exciting, for an exciting discussion. I have a question for you, Jay, for your comments. You mentioned, you were the only person in this conference to have mentioned child labor. So my question to you is, how serious is this issue in India, and how are you addressing it? Do you find it frequently in some of your potential projects, and how do you resolve this issue?
So when we look at investments in companies, we have an agreement with all our portfolio companies, which actually bars them on any of the social aspect, which includes your child labor. That is one of the aspects. That is on the paper. But in terms of monitoring, there is also monitoring from a company point of view. So the company has to necessarily mandate or look at the people who are going to be deployed at the site. There is a visual or a face ID or a recognition or the punching which happens at the site at the multiple levels. So that is also being looked at, monitored and tracked. And from a compliance point of view, they are required to submit on a quarterly basis that there have been no child labor or the unsafe social working conditions which have been employed at any of the sites which they are working at. So through the practical agreement point of view, as well as from a practical implementation point of view, working in both the aspects.
Thank you for a wonderful panel. This is Utkarsh from Batex Energies. We are a lithium-ion battery recycler. I have one question for all the investors on the panel. What is more attractive to the investors? A specialized feed recycler that is only doing lithium-ion battery recycling or any other recycling, or a multi-feed recycler who is also doing lithium-ion, magnet, or precious metals, e-waste? So from that perspective, what is that investors actually find more attractive? That's my question.
So definitely, when we talk about this sector, we are also, a lot of investors, a question around the market size perspective, right? And especially the reason is, again, how many batteries are in the market and also, in our perspective, having multiple is basically, but aligned, right? Not completely a different kind of thing, but aligned might be make more, basically because it will expand the overall size of the market and might be more lucrative for anyone to consider like more on the investment perspective. And again, I'm talking about the whole like with the way VC-able or kind of the investment opportunity versus a traditional way to basically raise the capital. So definitely the question, market is a question, and with this approach, I think market can be expanded.
Any other questions?
Hi, this is Rohit. Question to anybody from the panel. So mainly the investors actually. So how do you look at, I mean, since this is a technology which is still scaling up and finding its feet, so how do you address, let's say, companies that are still, you know, negative on EBITDA, they are not able to raise enough, they are still raising startup capital and they want to raise more debt to support the growth of business. So how do you sort of address that? I mean, they want to scale up, but then they are not able to because people would look at the numbers and say, oh, look, this is not that great a business or cannot be scaled as much. So they are still caught up in that smallish sort of turnover. So how do you look at that then?
Yeah, I mean, see, this is $1 million question, right? In investing, like, if you, there's a startup in front of you, which is the numbers are not looking good, but this is not the first time that such a startup hasn't got an investment. I mean, so essentially, what you really need to look for at that point is there anything which is, so you to firstly you to dig deep into that. So you to look at a technical level, is there any differentiation, whether it's in the team or the process or in the technology itself, where there's potential to tomorrow scale up and given the capital, can they do something with it, right? So I think there are two key things to look for. So is there a potential for margin expansion? And is there some scale up that could happen, meaningful scale up, which is revenue expansion, either in India or internationally? So it's really about the going way beyond the numbers, really. Numbers is just one part of it. Going way beyond the numbers to look at their partnerships, their feedstock. I mean, in this scenario, feedstock becomes super important. So I think those are the things, and also the offtake becomes very important. What kind of relationships have you created? So if you are able to look at this value chain and see there's something of different, either which is different or higher value than most other companies in the space. So it's a bit of a relative evaluation as well as an absolute evaluation of the company that would really help make that decision.
And what I'd also like to add is that, look, India today has a lot of opportunity, both for the startup community as well as from a financing perspective, right? We can definitely look way beyond the typical equity and debt investors. There are opportunities to explore blended finance. You can look at customer advances, supply chain finance. There are multiple options available, and there are investors at different stages of growth of the company, right? There are very early stage investors, and there are micro VCs, there are early growth. So I think startups also will have to be more proactive and reach out to the right set of investors and make the right pitch to them. That's what I'd like to share. And anything else?
As of now, people are basically not getting into those detail of the numbers, right? It's more about you need to prove the scale and the viability, right? So the sector required that first to, so if we are able to see like the scale is possible, the way the market sizing is possible, and there's some kind of viability, I think it is good enough for attracting, at least for the very early stage of the support and all, right? And later on, I think people see if these are the 2-3 KPIs has been achieved, then might be numbers will shape up in the future.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and I see a hand raised there.
So, with the rapidly evolving sodium-ion chemistries, how do you look at not repeating the same mistakes that we did in early lithium-ion battery recycling, so that the same mistakes are not repeated in the sodium-ion recycling, like either lack of collection networks or standardization? And also, for example, when we extract the lithium-ion battery, there is high market recovery incentive for nickel and lithium, but that's not for sodium, right? So are there any viable business models for sodium-ion battery recycling?
Ashish, you seem to be the best person to answer that question.
Yes, I think it's a very evolving scenario with sodium-ion batteries today. See, there are two ways to look at it. One is from an EV industry standpoint, and second is, of course, from a recycling standpoint and the output medium. From an EV standpoint, my understanding is that the battery chemistries are going to keep, getting more innovative, and we'll be looking at more dense output, more longer battery life that is there. So in that regard, the technology will keep updating. That said, how we have solved for it is we have established critical partnerships for any, in case there is a new innovation in technology. We have worked, previously as well with certain OEM partners to ensure that we are able to cultivate recycling expertise according to that technology, which they see is going to see that round of scale and commercialization happening. So that is one aspect. From the recycler standpoint, it is very critical that the material recovery makes it a viable process, right? Unless we are able to recover the value which is beyond the cost of entire process, there is no outcome to it, and there is no feasibility of the business altogether. But that's where policy push like EPR mandate become very critical, right? They ensure that the entire value chain is sustainable. They ensure there is enough incentive for recycling, for circularity to take place. And once that is achieved, offtake medium, of course, becomes a very good way to ensure that there is an output which is leveraged by the manufacturers again. So I think this in its entirety should complete the what do you call, the viability of certain new chemistries. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashish. And with that, we conclude this panel discussion. And over to you, Divya.
Thank you, Janvi and the panel, and for offering such great insights that how circularity can evolve just from being a sustainability goal to a core business and investment strategy for a, like as we rightly discussed, for a resource efficient economy like India.